we will go ahead and start the County Operations Committee meeting for September 26th. It's a couple minutes after 12. So the first action is to approve the minutes of August 29th. So I need a motion. Dr. Blair and Mr. Renaud is a second. Any comments, clarifications, questions on the minutes? All right, seeing none. All in favor of approval with the sign of aye? Aye. Aye. Those against with nay? All right, that passes. As all of the other committees are doing, we will move into the budget discussion next. We will do the budget in one motion, and so I'll get a motion on the floor first for the budget. Mr. Phelan and Ms. Williams. All right, so I'm going to pass this over to Administrator Sorrell to walk us through the budget. He's had a few rounds of this, so he's getting pretty smooth at presenting. It's all yours, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, you would think after 7 or 8 years I might have it figured out by now. All right, so before you today we've got the FY24 recommended budget. We've got a short slide deck that if you were in committees yesterday, you've seen some of the numbers once, twice, or 3 times, depending on which committees you were in yesterday. And you may see it a couple more times today if you're in other committees yet this afternoon. But just to highlight this year's cover, this is the newly built Cedar Hills Drive. From this vantage point, you're standing in Mr. Elsasser's district and looking at Mr. Ricker's district. So at a very high level, the recommended budget, as we do have done many years in the past, we've got sources and uses. Sources are the revenues, it's where the money comes from. And we have a recommended sources of across all funds of $150.62 million. Of that, we've been pointing out that intergovernmental revenues, which are sales taxes, income taxes, personal property replacement taxes, grants, salary reimbursements, are the largest revenue source we have, and it's about 1/3 of all of our revenues. Property taxes are the 3rd highest revenue source that we have. On the uses side, or the expenditures, or where the money goes, we're recommending $154 million and just a shade under 900,000, 898,000 and change to be exact. So we'll say 154.9 million in expenditures. Of that, our greatest expense is also our greatest asset, that being our workforce. That bar includes wages, benefits, pension obligations, health insurance type expenses. A couple of minutes about property taxes. We're recommending that your rate of 82.41 cents per $100 of equalized assessed value remain unchanged. That's consistent with the board's longstanding policy of keeping the rate flat. When you apply that rate to all of the taxable property in Peoria County, I wish it was the state of Illinois, but it's just Peoria County, that means that the recommended levy is $31,342,000 and change. That is an increase from the tax bills that we all just finished making our 2nd installment on earlier this fall. And that is a function of the increased property values. Countywide, after the quadrennial reassessment process, the Supervisor Assessment's Office is projecting that EAV will grow by 6.7%. Some areas will grow at higher rates, some will grow at lower rates. There are even individual properties across the county that have seen decreases in their EAV. The pie chart that you see dominating this slide, the blue and the gray shaded wedges are our operating funds. So this is how we divide up that 82.41 pennies. The tan and yellowish pie wedges are our pension obligations. You would see sometimes in past years a third color that would be our debt service levy. We are not levying any property taxes in the debt service levy this year because there is no need for. In fact, there will be a resolution on executive committee / finance committee later this afternoon that will abate property taxes for the 2 bonds that typically get paid from the debt service fund. That being said, one of our operating funds is Headington Oaks, and that we do collect a property tax for that, and we use those property taxes to make a debt service payment. But it's an operating fund, not a debt service fund, and so that's why it's shaded in blue. Looking at what this committee has oversight of in terms of the total budget, there's revenues of $27.24 million and expenditures of $25.99 million spread across 7 different departments or funds. You can see them there. We'll obviously be willing and able to answer any questions you have about any one of them individually. How does the committee's oversight compare to the entire budget? Well, you've got 18% of the revenues under your purview, and 17% of the total budget when it comes to expenditures are under this committee's jurisdiction. We always also include some information about our general fund. So the general fund budget is recommended as a balanced budget this year. It's $56.77 million. Again, our largest revenue stream here in the general fund are those intergovernmental revenues, and property taxes are the 3rd largest. And again, it's consistent with the rest of the organization because the general fund is the largest fund that we have. It's roughly a little bit more than 1/3 of the entire spend on an annual basis. The portion of the workforce that is in the general fund comprises those personnel costs. So the committee has, from this perspective, actually 0% of the revenues and 0% of the expenditures, meaning all of the departments and offices that you have oversight of are non-general fund departments. And then, based on a question that the chair had yesterday for us, we've got some breakout information for you in terms of a specific item, expenditure item in the IT fund that relates back to software licensing fees that we see on an annual basis. So this slide will show you all the major categories. And then you'll note at the bottom, there's a pretty large one of almost $395,000. The next slide will break that $395,000 out. So I'll leave this up here just for a second. Obviously, we can come back to it during discussion if board members, committee members have individual questions or want to delve deeper. In terms of how we break out that $395,000, that's what this detail on this slide shows. So that you've got an accounting of how that is broken out. While that's up there and you're looking at it, before I turn it back over to the chairman for us to answer any of your questions, just an acknowledgement of all the offices and departments, both with oversight by this committee and not, for their work in getting us this far in the budget process, and acknowledgement and appreciation to the finance department and Heather's team in putting the book together and managing that process. As you know, and as I said yesterday, in January we implemented a new enterprise finance software called Munis, and at the same time this year we went from using Word and Excel to make the budget book to an online platform called Pattern Stream. Pattern Stream talks directly to Munis. Everything doing a process we've done for a long time, but using 2 different software platforms for the first time made it a little bit of a challenge. We've got a significant number of notes for process improvements for a year from now. So we're stand ready to make those improvements, and we are more than happy to answer any questions that you may have, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you, Administrator Sorrell, for the review on this. Also, I'd like to echo the thank you and appreciation to the staff and the teams who put this together. I know it was difficult, especially on a transition year, moving to a new software enterprise platform. So much appreciate the work done. One tactical thing I think I'll put out here is that in the organizing of the book, there is one set of funds in here that we want to transfer to public safety or health?
Public safety.
Public safety.
Public safety.
So the first one, PCAPS, Peoria County Animal Protection, belongs in public safety, and that was just an error on our part putting it in here, so that will move. When you go to those are in public safety, they will have those sheets to work with. I don't think there's any other action we need to take as far as relocating that under public safety.
Mr. Chairman, I would maybe recommend you ask for just a motion, a second, and a vote to make sure that we do go ahead and delete it from the operations budget, and then we'll repeat that process, but adding it in the Public Safety Committee meeting.
Okay, so I need a motion, Mr. Elsasser and Ms. Allison. All in favor of moving this PCAPS to public safety with the sign of aye? Aye. Those opposed? Okay, we passed that to move that.
And then the orange packets that shall be handed out right before the meeting now reflect that change, including the summaries that are at the front of the orange pages.
All right, so you can update your books with that. So with that, I will move to questions from the committee. Ms. Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Scott, I refreshed my iPad and the IT information was not on. Can we get that on our iPads so we can have time to really look at that?
Absolutely. In fact, CIO Little's got it in paper form that we can hand out right now if you'd like.
That's
But
great.
we can do that as well, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so we'll get that handed out. I would like to spend a little bit of time on that, but prior to that, we'll go ahead and field other questions from the committee on this budget. Mr. Renaud.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is the first budget discussion I've sat in on. And just one general comment that I'd like to make and maybe a recommendation to staff. I appreciate all of the information in here, especially when it comes to fund balances and the reserves and the percentages over. One thing I think I would like to ask is, and I just picked this number arbitrarily, but if the delta is over 20%, so if the reserve is 20% or more over what our reserve policy is, that there be an explanation as to why it's so high. If the
Or
department
low.
is saving for something, it would just be good to know. Again, if there's a better number, I'm open to that. But when I was looking through, it seemed like numbers under 20%, those numbers weren't as significant, but when it started escalating above that, you're talking more significant numbers. Then I just like to know what the departments were planning on using that for.
Okay.
And since we're talking about IT, something that I would like to ask a couple questions on and maybe make a recommendation on, if you look at BH20, so it's in the white pages, the budget highlights, and it's a breakdown of the IT user fees by department. For the county auditor, we have $8,002 coming from the general fund going directly into the IT fund for a department that I'm not really sure there's much IT work going on in or anything going on in right now. We haven't received anything from the auditor's office in quite some time. So I would recommend removing that and putting it into the capital fund if that's possible.
Mr. Renaud, we would need that $8,000 to come from some other department. So we would most likely reallocate that proportionally across all the other departments, because that would mean we're shorting the IT fund by that amount.
but it's less work that would be done. So is that,
Well, so it's using a cost allocation model. So that's, and the office still technically exists. So that's the cost of, whether they're using it or not, that's the cost of, as an example, the Office 365 licensure for the one position in that office, and a whole host of other things that are associated with being able to operate the IT department. So the cost of operating the IT department is X, and $8,003 is a portion of X. So if we wanted to zero out the auditor's office, we would reallocate that $8,000 across everybody else to still come up with X.
but it would be less one user than next year, correct? So it's still
Correct.
going to cost the same?
But as an example, she does have equipment and licensing. There's Office 365, Munis. Yes, she's not using those, but those are costs that are still incurred.
Okay, it just seems like a high amount for an office that doesn't do anything.
Okay. Well, thank you for that. Ms. Williams?
I'm glad that he brought up page BH20. I know, I don't want to put Heather on the spot, but I know Heather has been working on a better breakdown of these charges. I'd really, at some point, like to see that.
Okay. As far as instead of, maybe for clarification, so if you just take,
how many computers are they being charged
Yeah.
for? The whole spreadsheet of who's getting charged for specific software. Some software is not being used by some offices, and it's being used by others. So I just would like to see that breakdown
okay,
at some point.
I think that's a reasonable ask, and I think we've discussed that, so I don't want to speak for our CFO, but I think she has access to that data, and Mr. Little over IT has that, so maybe I could ask that they would provide that to the committee at minimum. So we see and understand, and I'm sure it's a significant size file, so I'm not sure the best way to share it. I don't know, if printing it off or putting it to us on a spreadsheet electronically, but I'll ask them to consider how to share that with us, so we better understand those costs. But good ask. Anything else, Ms. Williams? All right. Others from the committee? Okay, while you're thinking about that, I would like to at least have Mr. Little walk through a little bit of the subscription and maintenance fees that Mr. Sorrell put up here earlier for you, and you now have a printed copy. And again, from my position here, we all know all business operations, if you're public or private, transitioning to software IT systems is a must. So I'm not implying that we're doing wrong. We are doing the right things, moving to IT systems, making things more accessible. If it's Microsoft Office 365 and all the platform, if it's Munis or any of the other systems. But one of the things that come with that is an ongoing subscription. Subscription for the licenses and for a maintenance program to maintain and keep the software licenses that we have up to date, taken care of, and then provide services back to us so it's usable. So again, I'm not against the concept. One of the things I've challenged is, as we move this way, the big selling point is we're a more effective county. All of our departments should have better use of information to be able to drill down into reports, analyze data, perform their job more efficiently. And I think most of us who work in other environments experience that and know that. But as we work, we also know the cost of this ongoing license, and subscriptions are always a challenge. So I'll pause there. I'll ask Mr. Little maybe just to kind of give us his perspective of running the IT business, and give us a little more background, if you would, sir.
Well, I'll start off by saying that the what I would call the infrastructure and technology has changed drastically over the last 15 years, from more of a hosted model where we hosted everything in-house, we took care of everything in-house, to more of a model where now vendors provide that. And that reflects that. I mean, you're either going to pay for it on one side, or whether the vendor's going to support it on the other side, whether you're going to have the hardware or the staff to support it. We try to find that happy medium where it makes sense, where we have a SaaS-based system that makes sense, because you've also got to build in the business continuity and disaster recovery side. Also, historically, we've seen in this category yearly 3 to 5% increases, which were normal. Since inflation has hit the last couple of years, we've seen that sometimes double and triple from vendors. I'll give you one quick example this year. Civics Plus. We made the decision a couple years ago, came through the board, to outsource the hosting of all our county websites when we redid the websites, if you remember that. That now is all offsite, hosted by Civics Plus in a data center somewhere in the middle of the country. When we originally, and this is one of those that has a year-to-year renewal. Some of the larger ones with like Tyler, we do 3 year. We know 3 years what we're going to pay, and we work on those numbers to try to keep those between those 3 to 5%. When Civics Plus came to us about 2 months ago on this year's renewal, their original increase came to us at 36% increase for that. We had heard that was coming because Civics Plus has a very large customer base of counties. I had already gotten phone calls from other counties to see what they were seeing, and we all saw it. It was across the board, all the counties. We worked with them back and forth on several meetings and got that down to under 20%. I think we got the latest increase down to 18.5% for the year. So we negotiate all those individually. And, the benefit is that of having that system offsite is, of course, from a disaster recovery standpoint. We do still have a computer room here. It's a lot smaller than it used to be. It's still on it's still down on the G level. There's still multiple levels above it. So if we would have an issue there, that system still runs. Same way with Munis. When we came to the board 2 years ago for Munis, it was at that time the decision was made to move our financial system to a SaaS-based environment. Prior to that, if we would have had an issue, we would have had a fire in the building, we would have had water damage in the building, we would not have been able to issue checks, make payroll for weeks to do that. Today, we can run Munis from anywhere. You can plop down anywhere in the world, and if you have the right printer with the right security on it, I could print paychecks from my garage if I had to do that. So those are some of the changes and the increases you're seeing why this has continued to go up. There's mandates to come. Earlier this year, you approved the Tyler supervision, and that was a mandate from the state on new reporting that was required, and we had to go to a different software package to do that. So, I would say yes, the numbers have increased, but the amount of usage and the amount of data that we continue to capture, and from a technical side, if you look at the Odyssey system, I mean we're coming up on our 10th anniversary of that system. We pay $418,000 in support. But if you look who uses that system, that's our entire court system. From the minute you come into the jail, then book to probation, all the way through. It's a single, fully integrated system. Now, I will say that system still sits in-house and sits here. It runs on 40+ servers. It takes staff to support that and all those upgrades. We will have a decision on that system coming in 2025 on whether we continue to leave that system here, or we take that system and go to the cloud with it from a business continuity standpoint. That's a business decision and a board system that'll eventually have to be made. And there are instances throughout here where we do some contingency. There's software that comes up in offices that they want to implement and partial through the year, where they'll pay for a part of it, and then we pay the other part of it. If you look at state's attorney implemented from Axon a new system in the last year. They paid for the initial implementation. Now we cover the annual $40,000 fees for that. So there's instances like that continue to go The other change that is occurring, which we've piloted, which we have about 150 users in now, is the move away from traditional telephony to Teams. Um, Teams is using the Microsoft client, but we still have to pay a Teams fee for that. So it used to be when a lot of our charges for telephony was over on the telephony and telecommunications side of things, we now split that out because now we have to pay an annual license fee per user. That gets put into this. So the technology changes, and so does where the dollars come from, and as we continue to upgrade systems, um, I would say though that if you look at where we've come the last 6 or 7 years, we've done significant upgrades and replacements of systems, and really looking forward, we have upgraded about all of our core systems. There's the one system that still hangs out there that has not been looked at yet and would be very expensive to upgrade, but still seems to be doing the job it's doing, is the DevNet tax system. Is still, we've ran that system for 20 years and still does its job. We've had discussions with the treasurer on looking at that, and right now she's happy with that. And so, we'll continue to move along. But all the other systems were in desperate need from a standpoint of taxpayer interaction. A lot of the systems we've put in today have web frontage, so no longer do taxpayers have to come to the courthouse anymore. You can look all that data up online. When we put in the Eagle Recorder system, I remember we put that in. The Recorder of Deeds office, I think, had 10 or 12 people at that time, or 10 to 12. That system got done. We reduced that down to 4 people. So there was some savings there. When Odyssey went in and we got through some of what I would call the really focused on the processes, and that as that went in, you look at our circuit clerk's office, we reduced circuit clerk staff by quite a bit. I don't remember what the number exactly was, but in there it was now. Yeah, so I mean there was a reduction in staff in that office of 20 plus people over those systems. So you pay on one side and you reduce on the other, and on both sides of that. So I hope that answered some of your questions.
Yeah, it does. And again, as I opened with, I don't have a problem. I actually encourage us to stay current with technology and provide better service to our public. That's what we're here to do. But there's a balance of,
Right.
Are we cost effective? You're replacing human capital in some cases with software and software licenses. And where this goes in the future, we don't know, but I guess I'd like all of us to just be aware, make sure we clearly understand the cost that we're incurring and the quality of the services that we're providing to our public.
I will, Mr. Chairman, I will say that the continued challenges with security drives up some of these costs. We've got some more to do on security, which I will bring back to this group within the next probably 60 days. But some of these increases we have been seeing is within these applications. They have to be more secure. I mean, if we all pay attention to what's going on in the news, even one of the largest gambling companies in the world, MGM, was just hit.
Mm-hmm.
That's going to cost them $100+ million, and the same thing came out. Caesar had been hit at the same time, and it cost them $30 million. So even those with deep pockets and can throw all kinds of money at stuff, it takes one little slip up, and there's issues that occur. So
No, I agree with security. There's many examples out there, even more recent examples in the past 12 to 18 months. So due diligence in that area is a must, especially when we got public's information, things that we have to maintain. So with that, I'm going to ask if any of the committee members have questions. Dr. Blair first.
I know that we discussed when we met prior in our preliminary budget meeting about onboard. Here it shows that you spent a little less than $9,000 next year for that. Is that just a portion of those costs? Does the county clerk have any more of that?
no, that falls to our budget to cover.
I would recommend looking at a new program or somehow get better
Yes.
service from them, as that program is not supporting what we need it to do.
Okay. All right. I don't think you'll have many objections here.
So, someone had to say it.
Yeah, but thank you for putting it on the floor for us, making that one open. All right. Ms. Williams?
I'm sorry. There was a lot of emails going around about staff count. So I know that Heather was willing to go through the overall staff count and give us a overview of all of that. So I'd ask that she could do that, please.
Well, we do have staff count as a resolution item in this agenda today.
This is
You
more
want-
of just an explanation of the overall in all departments.
Okay.
Is that okay?
I'm okay
Yeah,
with that.
absolutely. Heather can
Let's,
come to the
what-
microphone, or
yeah.
however you want to take it, Mr. Chairman.
yeah, let's go ahead and do that now, since it does connect to the budget, and it'll also expedite our resolution later here that we have for staff count approval. So Heather, if we put you on the spot to walk through, and I think if you look in your board packet, it should be in your packet, the staff head count is one of the, let me find it here.
BH 33.
Yes. BH 33 in the book. Okay.
Which I
Heather,
did
would
not
you
bring
want to
up.
go ahead and walk us through this?
Yes, I'm happy to do so. I have, at the board members' request last week, I had gone through and done kind of a 2-year comparison of position changes within the county, and I'll go through, obviously, the county board, there's been no change. The county administrator, departments that report up through the county administrator, we have had mid-year fiscal 23, an animal control officer in PCAPS was approved by the board, and I believe later today, actually, they're bringing another request for another FTE to help with the mobile services unit that will be going into effect later this fall in advance of the fiscal 24 budget. Headington Oaks, we had a reduction by 0.5. The bookkeeper position was eliminated, and as you know, the director of finance position is no longer, since the nursing home is closed. County admin line, we have, over the last 2 years, we've added 1 DEI line staff. We've reallocated communication staff from recycling and management, or recycling, and then the management analyst position was also converted. So for the net increase of 1.65 over 2 years. Facilities and grounds, they're requesting 2 additional FTE this year, 1 at the courthouse and 1 out at the county jail. County highways change was 1 that was reallocated from the auditor's office after the fiscal 22 budget was passed. Planning and zoning, they're requesting 0.6, a part-time plumbing inspector. This will help them with succession planning as they're anticipating a retirement early fiscal 24, and they need to make sure that everything is covered within their office to run smoothly. Recycling, they are requesting 1 FTE to replace a combination of 2 positions that were in place pre-COVID. But they're just asking for 1 additional FTE. And then we can go on to the elected offices if you'd like, unless you have questions on that section.
Sorry, let's field questions here if there are any to the administration. And again, this information that Heather shared with you is in your packet. It was on page 8 of our packet. For the administrative staff count. And so any questions about the changes over the past 2 years in any of these positions or these departments? We can come back as you look at it, if you have questions. I guess the only one that jumps out at me was, maybe we could ask Administrator Sorrell about the recycling one, if you could maybe articulate that ad, please.
Happy to, Mr. Chairman. So, at the end of 2020, we, through a reduction in force, we reduced that office, which a decade ago had 3 FTEs down to 1 FTE. And then since then, there's been the occasional intern from Bradley during that academic year. So it's been 1 FTE plus that occasional intern type position part-time since January of 21. What we've seen since that period in time is there are a number of value-added duties that the office has undertaken, in addition to the work that they were already doing, to the point where 1 FTE and that occasional intern from Bradley is not cutting it. So we're recommending that a line staff position be added to the department starting next year. That new position is going to include, or duties will include a number of things that are as follows. Overseeing logistics for recurring events. We've increased the number of recurring events that we're doing, and the logistics behind those have proven to be quite time-consuming. We'll also be providing, the position will also provide assistance to other units of local government in the county with various recycling and sustainability programming and events that align with what we're doing. Those have also increased in frequency and quantity. Other duties will also include splitting. It doesn't happen very often anymore, but it does still happen. Classroom speaking engagements with the SRC coordinator, and then also splitting with the coordinator position the maintenance of sustainability curriculum for those primary school educators. Most of that curriculum is needing to be updated on a recurring basis, but most of that curriculum is now available so that we're not in the classroom, the educators doing, following that curriculum themselves. And then obviously the coordinator has a variety of other duties on top of everything else that's going on. So happy to answer any questions, but that at a high level is what the recommended position will do, and some justification for why it's needed.
Okay, no, thank you for the additional. One more opportunity for anyone on the administrative staff. Any questions about the other ads or changes? Mr. Elsasser?
Well, this committee doesn't actually vote on the county administrator's budget, though, do we? That's from another committee, right?
Correct.
Right.
That's executive.
But I do have, I don't know if it's appropriate or not, but I do have a question. I mean, we went from 13 or 14 to 11 down to 6, which is, I think, fairly reasonable, but now all of a sudden we're back to 9.5. And you know, for our employees in different departments, I would think that the county administration would be the ones to set the example for everyone, to follow. And so, that's just a little bit concerning to me. I'm probably sticking my foot in my mouth here, but that's just the way I feel about it.
Okay. I appreciate that input.
I don't know if anyone, maybe I'm the only one that feels that way, but.
Okay. Mr. Phelan.
Yeah, I'm just curious, this was before my time, but am I right to see that Headington Oaks had 170 employees as of 2020? Is that accurate?
That is correct. And we closed the facility in August of 2020 from an operating standpoint, but we still had a finance component that was associated with it. But we successfully discharged all of our residents and closed the facility in August of 2020.
And as of 2020, what services were the IT department providing to Headington Oaks?
I would say, consistent with other departments. It was a large enough facility and operation that there was a resource, assigned part-time, and then there obviously was many of the costs that CIO Little talked about that would be applicable to that office and that department. But what you saw was, the software costs. That was also when we were transitioning to Teams, Office 365, and so moving from legacy Microsoft Office to Office 365, there were different costs associated with that, and then from the staffing side, those resources were reallocated to other offices and other departments. And I think if Mr. Phelan, if you're looking for a little bit more detail, I'm sure Mark can provide a little bit more detail for you.
I guess my final question, maybe this is more geared towards Mark, is I see that IT's staffing level has not changed through that period, and it seems like a lot of employees or maybe services declined with the closure of Headington Oaks. So my question would be, are those employees currently performing different roles, or what has changed during that time?
I would say from a software support side of things, we used a SaaS service which was supported remotely from an off-site, so we had very little on the support side. From an on-site side of things, it was a fairly new facility. It had all new wiring. It had a phone system in it that we did not even fall under our support. It was under contract with somebody else. It was on our what we call outside of the courthouse. We have one or two people that cover all our facilities outside of the courthouse. I mean, I could go back and look. There really wasn't a lot of issues there. I will say that since that time, if you look at the number of people supporting different applications, we've gained some, more applications from a more complication side of things. If you look at our recorder of deed systems, our plan and the zoning systems, those were pretty old systems that did not require much support. Now I have analysts that have to support those systems. Along as we continue to use more and more of our criminal justice system, I have analysts that have to support those systems. And as we move into Teams, I will be able to support as we move into Teams with the same staff we have. We're not going to add, but a Teams phone is now a device. It's no longer a phone like you think at home. It runs an operating system. It needs upgraded. It sits on the network. So even though the Teams will save us money on the side of getting rid of our phone switches and all of those items, it becomes another device I have to support. So as you look over time, as we add software, as we add Munis, but as we take things away, it still washes out. We still do over 7,000 help desk calls a year, 7,700 or so. So that really hasn't changed a whole lot. So
Thank you for that explanation.
yep, you're welcome.
Yeah, and maybe it'd be appropriate, and we can speak Mr. Little on this, but future operations meetings, not every meeting, but on occasion, you can give us an update on some metrics, help desk calls, kind of staffing,
Yes.
changes you have, so we as a committee have a better understanding of the workload and the actions and transitions that you are making within the IT world. Is that a fair ask?
Yeah, we're gonna we'll come forward in the next couple months and do a full overview of all the applications we support. We're one deep in a lot of applications. I have one primary person and maybe a backup, so it's not like we're three deep on applications. And we'll go over all that with you.
Okay.
We'll come forward and do an overview of all the equipment that nobody sees, all the stuff in the closets, all the security equipment, all the hardware, and we've got teams that have to support all that. Regardless, if I've got 6 people at a facility or I've got 2, I still need all that hardware and all that security to support that. So, yep.
Okay, great,
do
thank
that.
you.
Thank you.
Mr. Elsasser.
This is not a staffing question, but I missed it the last time. The company that dinged us for an 18% increase, how much do we spend for a total dollar amount per year?
It's like 50. What's the clause?
58?
Hold on. I don't have it off the top.
58,000 or so? Oh, okay,
58,000.
no, okay, no, I was,
It's not a huge,
for some reason I was thinking it was probably a lot more than that, so I'm.
no,
I'm
it is
sorry.
not.
That's fine.
But like I said, we did work
Yeah.
with them over
No, I'm
several
fine.
meetings and got that
Yeah,
down.
no, for
so-
some reason I
Okay.
was thinking it was a lot more, so, thank you.
Okay. Well, I'd like to have Mr. Hare speak.
I just have a general question that Member Renault's insight on the auditor brought, and I'm not here to discuss the auditor, but it goes more to the allocation, that if I'm just at the surface listening to Rob, and it's like he found $8,000, but if we find $8,000, since that's part of X, how do we get the $8,000 out of X? I mean, does it have to wait till the next budget cycle? Because it sounds like it's just being absorbed, any cost savings you do is being absorbed by the allocation model, and we have to wait to see the $8,000 at a later date somehow. So how does that work?
I'm gonna maybe pass that to Mr. Sorrell for
It-
a response.
I'll try to answer it. So, IT costs $5.5+ million, so 8,000 in the grand scheme of things, Mark can probably absorb. But the point I was trying to make was IT costs $5.5+ million. If we remove, there are still equipment in that office. She's still, the water's still on the payroll. So there are, the Munis subscription, the Office 365 subscription, those costs are still going to be there for the organization once she's gone. So the rest of the offices, departments will share in that $8,003. Yeah, $8,002, because the cost of IT is still $5.5 million plus.
So if you extrapolate, and again, I'm not trying to zero in on the auditor, I'm just trying to look at how the allocation model works. So if you had a bigger thing, it may affect the ultimate budget for, say, IT. Like if it was $75,000 of X
Right.
that,
So-
that we were cutting or something, then what happens? How do we get the 75 out of X?
So I think that will, to a degree, be answered when we share the information that Ms. Williams asked for, and that will show like a breakdown. Every department, appointed or elected, got a report this year that broke down in itemized detail how the IT user fee was allocated and what the cost associated was for their department. So as an example, I received the documentation for the county administration department and the county board department. So we put those two together. And so, that's, it's $154,012. And so the report that finance generated and was sent to me tells me how that $154,000 was allocated. And so that's the report that Ms. Williams has asked for that we'll be able to share with you going forward.
Thank you.
And again, I would say that'll be part of our discussion on upcoming operations meetings, so we can better understand some of this allocation. We're at the time now of budget, so, but I think they're great questions, so thank you for bringing those up. And because we provide services to our employees, we need to understand how those services are priced out, charged out to the respective departments, and make sure they're efficient on behalf of all of our employees and our taxpayers. With that, any other questions on the budget before we take a vote on the operations budget? All right, seeing no other questions, all in favor of the operations budget as presented with the change that we made to move the PCAPs to safety? All in favor at the sign of aye? Aye. Aye. Those opposed? All right. We will now move to the informational items, and I think for essence of time, we will just review and file those. Nothing significant changed, but they're good data points, so please take your opportunity to review. We have some resolutions. So the first resolution to address is PCAPS. It's an adjustment on the FTE staffing, and I need a motion to put that on the floor. Dr. Blair and Mr. Phelan. All right, I ask Ms. Spencer to give us a quick update on this one. Get your mic on? Sorry. I don't think it's still on yet.
All right. This is a request to add a medical services coordinator position to the PCAPS lineup. We have our mobile spay neuter unit that is due to arrive at the end of October, and we are looking to onboard this position to be able to take the project from inception on through. There's a significant amount of coordination of moving the animals in front of the veterinarian on a daily basis when they're there, that the shelter animals, in addition to animals that have to be spayed and neutered, the coordination of medical procedures in-house, as well as how we're going to bring our low-cost programs back to the community. And we're looking for a program coordinator to fill that position, and we're requesting the increased FTE to get that done this year.
Okay. And again, just a reminder, we did approve the mobile veterinary clinic and bringing it to one dedicated provider, providing some additional services of value. And this support role, for the most part, is tying to support that initiative. But I'll open up for questions. Anyone? Mr. Renaud?
Will this position be part of organized labor or represented?
No.
Okay.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay. All in favor of the motion with the sign of aye? Aye. Those opposed? All right, that carries. The next item is the authorized staffing counts. We had a fair amount of discussion, and we had Heather review that with us for the administrative staffing count. You'll see that on your packets. I need a motion to put this on the floor. Ms. Allison and Ms. Coates is a second. Don't know if we need a whole lot more commentary on this topic. I think we walked through each of these positions. Heather provided that detail. Anyone have any questions on this? All right, no questions. We need a vote. All in favor with the sign of aye? Aye. Those opposed with a nay? That passes. Thank you. And then the last one for resolutions is the 2024 Peoria County Employee Health Plan premiums. And that is in your packet, and we'll have Shauna walk us through the adjustments for the 2024 premiums. Oh, sorry, I need a motion. Mr. Renaud and Mr. Elsasser.
Good afternoon, everybody. Still not used to these new microphones, so tell me if I'm too soft or too loud. Just a little bit of background on how we go about developing our premiums every year. We work very closely with Nyhart, who is our actuarial firm. They specialize in healthcare actuary services, so we work with them to evaluate potentially upcoming claims, the claims that we've had over the last couple of years, and develop a really good trend model that we are all very comfortable with. With that, then, for example, this year they determined that we are estimating to have about $8.2 million in health-related expenses, so mainly medical claims and prescription claims. And so with that, we knew we had to have $8.2 million coming into the fund in the form of revenue in order to break even. So the main source of revenue going into the Employee Health Fund, as you probably saw when you reviewed the budget, was our premiums. So there's two components to the premium. We establish the unit cost, and then we divide that unit cost into an employee share and an employer share. So currently in our collective bargaining agreements and also in our plan document, we list out that for single coverage, the employer will pay 80% of the premium for single coverage. The employer will pay 75% for employee plus one, and it's a formula, so they still pay 80% of the employee share of employee plus one 75% for the spouse. And then on family coverage, we pay 80% of the employee piece of family coverage and then 70% for the dependent coverage. And so that's how all of that gets structured. A few years ago, the board had identified and asked us to look at adding in an additional subsidy to offset the employee share of the premium based upon how our medical trends were heading and looking at the out-of-pockets with the cost of living adjustments that employees were receiving. So we did the same process again this year. And so with that, the premium chart that is in your budget or I'm sorry, in your packet, it's this one. It's very colorful. It establishes the employee and employer share plus continues the subsidy model that we have had over the last couple of years. As you know, we're going to go through the the bid process for the employee health plan at 2024. And so we'll be looking at a number of items with that for 2025. But for this final year of our contract, and talking with Chairman Ricker, and we decided that it would be best to come forward at this time, keeping the same structure as what we've done in the past. So what does that mean? So if you look at the gray column on the far left, that's the current monthly premiums. Premiums are paid bi-weekly. So that is the current monthly amount. The blue column shows the unit cost, the employee contribution, and employer share. So, and then it shows the subsidy amount. So in previous years, we have not had a subsidy for employee-only coverage. We did have a subsidy for employee plus one and family. You'll see that we have a 55% recommended subsidy for employee-only coverage. That is due to the Affordable Care Act. So, you know, we've been working through our series of health plan related meetings that we've been having with all of you, and we've talked about the affordability test that we have to do every year. And so with that, this was the first year that we did not meet the minimum threshold. So our plan was off by $10 with that. So in order to be compliant with the federal regulations, that 55% subsidy is what we need to be compliant for the employee only share. And when we talk about the subsidy, I just want to be clear, that is the percentage of the increase, not the percentage of the overall premium, but the percentage of the increase from 2023 to 2024. So for example, if you then go over to the yellow column, the employee share of the premium for employee only coverage on the PPO plan would be, that increase would be $66.61. That's what an employee with single coverage on the PPO plan will pay additionally out of pocket next year. If you go on down the line, the employee will pay $383 increase and $841. And then so on and so forth for the qualified high deductible plan below that. So per pay period, because again, we get paid bi-weekly, employee only coverage with the subsidy will see a $2.78 cent increase per paycheck. Employee plus one on the PPO, $15.96, and a little over $35 per paycheck for family coverage. And then on the high deductible plan, it's $4 for employee only, $24.74 for employee plus one, and $34.02 for employee plus two. And then in the green on the far right, you'll see the percent, and that's the employee share. Then you'll see the percentages. So the highest percentage increase is 16%. It varies anywhere from 2% to 16% next year. We did go in then and look at every employee individually based upon the anticipated cost of living adjustment that was either in the budget or what we were anticipating, for example, with PICO, which we'll talk about here in a little bit. And we went in and applied that 2024 increase to their annual wage, and then subtracted out the additional premium costs for those on the health plan. And with this subsidy level and premium level, no one has, based upon our estimates, no one has less take-home pay in 2024. The percentage increases in these subsidies keep everyone whole for next year. So that was a lot of numbers at once. I'm sorry. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer.
No, thank you, Shauna. So I'll pass this back out. Ms. Allison.
Can you just repeat that last part about the no one having less take-home pay to make sure I followed?
Sure. So we went in and said, okay, for example, Shauna Musselman, I make X this year, based upon, an anticipated wage increase. I would be making Y in 2024, but I also know that I will be paying $25 per paycheck more in health insurance. So we took that raise minus my additional out of pockets for premium increases and made sure that no one had a negative amount based upon our estimates.
Good question. We're trying to minimize the impact to employees. We know healthcare is a very expensive item, and, you know, as Shauna commented, that we have a lot of work ahead of us before next year, so I'm glad that we have a great committee here that will work and help us through that. Other questions from the floor? Mr. Elsasser.
Do the employees and everyone around the courthouse seem to be satisfied with this, from what you can tell? I mean, I know it's not like you're out asking everybody, but have you heard anything, or?
So we bring it to the committee first.
Yeah?
We are in the process of scheduling our annual meet and discuss meeting for later next week with the unions. And at that point, they have a chance to offer any
Okay.
comment that they would like to.
Okay.
But typically, their comment is related to, is there going to be a negative take-home pay impact?
Okay.
So
Okay, thank you.
That's good, good question. So there will be a full process of communicating, and then there's the annual enrollment time frame for the employees to enroll in their health care of their choice, the package and offering. So this is all time to comply with that. Any other questions regarding health care and the premium on this resolution? All right. All in favor at the sign of aye? Aye. Opposed? All right, that passes. What I'd like to do is, we do have an executive session. Before we go to that, I want to ask for public comment. Does anyone here have public comment they'd like to share? All right, once, going twice, no public comments. And we will also take miscellaneous at this point before we move to executive. So among the committee members, anything that you want to bring up for miscellaneous? Okay. With that, I need a motion to move to executive session for the purpose of labor relations. Ms. Williams and Dr. Blair is a second. All in favor at the sign of aye? Aye. Those opposed? All right, thank you. We'll give it a second here and we'll move to